understanding what your mother or your father, whoever at the time, might have gone through, what they might have been told, which, as we know, in Catholic Ireland, you were told, forget about it, move on, get married, don't tell your husband. If you have other children, don't tell your other children. And a lot of these women bought that hook, line, and sinker. And now, with adult children approaching them, oh no, I can't do it. I haven't told my husband, I haven't told my children. Some come around eventually, and the very rare few, like my mother, actually told their husbands and were upfront about it. So I was very fortunate in that when I finally located her, not only did she welcome me, but she told me she herself had tried to find me and had gone back to her mother baby home in Ireland. Just to give you a little background before that, and I know, Declan, you have history that's relevant to this, there was obviously an enormous system in place in Ireland run by the Catholic Church. They were the authority in Ireland in terms of not just religious life, but social life. And you know, family situations, whether it be poverty, being born the wrong side of the blanket, out of wedlock, led families to do desperate things or be told by the Catholic Church what to do. And as a result, tens and hundreds of thousands of children were separated from their families, taken away from families, thrown into industrial schools and convent homes and Magdelene laundries. And it was just all part and parcel of this culture of secrecy, of shame, of treating human beings really that they were less than, because they were not a nun, they were not a priest, they were not up on this pedestal. And I think one of the ugliest secrets in that history is the Magdelene laundries, because they have been so swept under the carpet. I guess, we're going back to the early 1990s with the industrial schools. That's when a lot of that started to come to light. Even before that, there were people, well, Paddy Doyle and his book, The God Squad, was out in the late 80s. So there was sort of, I won't say widespread knowledge, but it was starting to become part of the public consciousness that we have this whole generation and class of children who were put through this system. And not only that, but were horribly abused, sexually abused, physically abused, emotionally, mentally, just simply walked away scarred. And without really a sound education, which is the saddest thing. You now have a generation of people who didn't get what they were supposed to under the Irish Constitution, which was their rights protected and the right to an education. And as that started to come into the public view, there were some murmurs, you know, well, what about these women in these institutions run by the nuns? They always did our laundry, or, you know, they would do sewing for us, or the parish would take the priests and the nuns' laundry there. And gradually you started to hear some of these stories, but it really wasn't from the women, because I don't think that they ever really felt that they could talk about it. They were ashamed of their own background. But the laundries existed almost in a separate microcosm, because they were not run by the state, which at least the industrial schools and some of the cottage homes and residential institutions did come under the authority and remit of the Irish government, but the laundries were privately run by 4 religious congregations. It was Our Lady of Charity of Refuge, the Sisters of Mercy, the Sisters of Our Lady of Charity, and the Good Shepherd Sisters. And the common belief with all of the abuse stories coming to the public forefront was that, oh, well, the government had nothing to do with this, so we're not going to hear their cases. They're not part of any of the redress investigations. They were privately run. The women were there voluntarily, which I always find laughable. And they were free to come and go as they pleased. And that was the end of it, as of 2002, when the Redress Act was passed, and thankfully thousands of survivors of abuse were at least given a voice in some measure to file a claim, you know, for what they had suffered. But the Magdalenes were completely left out of it. So it was about the same time that I had found my mother. I had learned a lot about her history and learned that she herself had spent 10 years in a laundry in Waterford after she worked, well, she got a very basic education, but I can tell just in correspondence with her, the way she writes, if it was 8th grade, that would be, you know, stretching it severely. And not that she's not bright or clever, she is. Very clever lady, very resourceful, you know, has survived. But she really did not get much formal education, and about the age of 15, she was sent to do sewing at the Waterford Laundry, and spent 10 years there, got out with a work referral from the nuns because she had done such a great job. And they told her, we'll get you a job in Dublin, working at Our Lady's Hospital. So she worked there for about 2 years as a ward aide, and then that's when she met my father and became pregnant with me. The reason she ended up in an industrial school in a laundry was she was one of 4 children born out of wedlock to my grandmother. And I'm still trying to figure out how she didn't get stoned back in the 1920s and 30s. But somehow, you know, they kind of got scattered to the 4 winds. My eldest uncle was raised by family in the village he was born in. But a lot of people don't know that he was his mother's son. He was one of those classic elephants under the carpet. And my mother and another brother, who we've still not been able to account for, but likely went through the industrial school system, is out there missing. They both ended up in industrial schools, and who knows with my uncle, but my mother's story. And then there was a 3rd sister who died of meningitis when she was 4. So those were the 4 children that my grandmother had. And then I think she was basically told either go to England or a laundry, you know, one or the other. So she went to England. She had a sister living in Manchester, eventually got married, never told her husband, had 7 more children.
Gosh.
And ironically, my eldest uncle moved to Manchester himself and lived right next door to his aunt and would see his mother all the time. And if they were privately together, she would acknowledge him. But if it was a family gathering, a funeral, a wedding, whatever, he was simply told, you know, you're the cousin. Just remember that. Just tell him, you know, you're a cousin. So, and there are still people in Wexford. I'm not allowed to, you know, post anything on the internet. You know, it has to be a secret and so forth and so on. So it's sad that that climate still exists. That's still something seen as shameful and so forth. So in my mother's case, that's one way to get into a laundry is by being born out of wedlock or losing your parents or being found indigent on the streets. So you would end up perhaps starting in an industrial school, but what we're finding more and more, although the state initially told us, oh, these were adult women, we're finding children as young as 12 who were shipped, just slipped, because usually they were all part and parcel on the same piece of land. So the nuns would quietly move a girl over to work during the day from an industrial school to a laundry and then send her back to sleep at night with the rest of her classmates at the industrial school. So we have uncovered evidence of that, and the state is gradually now coming to realize that, oh gee, yeah, they actually have evidence. So this organization, Justice for Magdalene's, that I serve as committee director on, we have some formidable researchers, and they uncovered quite a bit of documentation that shows that not only did the Department of Education either turn a blind eye or willfully allow underage children to work in these laundries, but that the Department of Justice was also referring women through the courts. So again, if you maybe had a drinking problem or your parents brought you in and said, we think she's in moral danger because she's pretty or flirty or a little too bold or cheeky, those would be grounds to be sent to a laundry. And it could be done on a court remand. So now you also have a criminal record, essentially, because you've been referred through the courts. So many paths. Women who had children out of wedlock and the families refused to take them back got sent to the laundry because there was nowhere else to go. Now, on the one hand, I know a lot of people would say, oh, well, you know, where else were they going to go? At least they had the nuns to take care of them. But the fact of the matter is, it's not just a situation where they got room and board. They actually worked and did commercial labor and were never paid for it. It would be one thing to be expected to do your own chores, to do the group laundry for the home or whatever, but when you're taking in laundry from hotels, you know, and from the garden, from the bishop's office or wherever, you know, and doing this, and the nuns are getting paid for it, and you're not seeing any of that, that's a horse of a different color, and that's a problem. And our contention, you know, we're not asking for huge settlements for these women. The large majority of them are obviously elderly. Their needs are simple. They need housing, they need counseling, they may need other social services, legal representation if they're trying to file to get a pension, and just access to their records. That's the biggest thing. A lot of them believe, unfortunately because of the abuse victim scandal, that they can file a claim through the redress board and be able to get access to their records, and they're being told by the state, we don't have any record of you. So we're also trying to put pressure on the state to apply pressure on these 4 religious orders that they've got to turn their records over to either the Department of Health, Department of Education. We're not concerned who they go to, but they've got to go to somebody and be protected. So these women have access to their files. We were talking earlier about people who came through that system who were given false information as they grew up. My mother thinks she is 7 years younger than she actually is. I have a copy of her original birth certificate that states she was born in 1933, but at some point during her tenure, either in the industrial school or the laundry, she was handed some falsified baptismal certificate that says she was born in 1940. And she believes that. That's what she was married on in the UK, and she's been eligible for a pension for 7 years longer than she thinks she was.